we did a clinical trial of 60 people. So we had 30 in each group. And in the control group, they actually took a fiber. So they took the same fibers that are in the Sugar Shift formula, and we saw some positive results in some of the markers just with fiber, but we did not see the overall drop in this endotoxin marker, which turned out to be one of the key benefits of the formula. After 90 days, there was a significant drop in endotoxin, and after 180 days, we took a group and unblinded the study and took them on for another 90 days, and almost all of the endotoxin was gone.
Welcome to Vitality Made Simple. The following production is for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you need medical advice, call your doctor. Now, let's go to Vitality Made Simple.
Welcome to Vitality Made Simple. This is the podcast that is going to equip you to feel better, look better, and to enjoy better relationships. Well, relationships are the point today. I've got Martha Carlin. Martha is the founder of BiotiQuest, and we're going to talk a lot about poop. You know, that's our favorite topics, isn't it, Martha? Welcome.
It is. I love to talk about poop.
Oh, it's the universal sign that God gave us to see how we're feeling. It's super important. And I want to, as a disclaimer, folks, I want to tell you that Martha is a good friend of mine. We met through the Science of Poop, and I have zero financial affiliation with anything she does. I buy her products. I love her products, but she is a citizen scientist, and she was in like the financial biotech industry. She's super smart. I told her before we started, Martha, please keep this simple for me. I'm not as smart as I look. And so we're gonna dig deep into some probiotics that she has. Probiotics were the first area that got me interested in, full body health. As I was prescribing antibiotics for my patients, I would have them go to Aikens at the time, this is, 20 years ago, and buy these refrigerated probiotics. Well, things have improved. And the thing I like about Martha's probiotics is that they are a consortium. In other words, they have these bacteria have a relationship with each other. They are bacteria that help other bacteria bloom. They work together, and then they help things in your gut bloom. So it's so different than buying something that's like a single product. I think this is more like food. This is more what your body recognizes. So, Martha, I've done enough of the talking. Tell our listeners briefly about how you got into this. It's a love story. And then tell them just about the most recent peer-reviewed study that you have.
Yes. So my background, as you said, was in business. Back in 2002, my husband, John, was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And so I took my business approach, which was kind of mapping out the whole system, and applied it to Parkinson's because it just didn't make any sense to me that a 44-year-old healthy marathon running guy could get Parkinson's. And so that was 23 years ago, and I spent 10 years really looking at the food, what we've done to our food, how that could have connected to what was going on with John, and really changing what we were eating and how we were eating, and he had a lot of great results from that. And then in 2014, I heard about this thing called the microbiome. I was like, what's that? And I read a book by Dr. Martin Blazer, who was talking about the rise of chronic disease in the age of antibiotics. And his book was called Missing Microbes, and that we were basically indiscriminately taking all these antibiotics, and they were in the food supply in many ways, and that was depleting this microbiome, which we're actually more microbial than we are human, like maybe 2 to 1 in terms of cells, but in terms of like genetic functions in the body, it's more like 300 to 1, what the microbes are doing for us. So they're kind of our internal pharmacy. So I fell in love with microbes, and later that year they showed that the microbiome could divide the two types of Parkinson's, and I was like, that's it. I stopped what I was doing and started the Bio Collective collecting poop. So I gradually over the next 10 years kind of became the poop queen. And when I first started the company, I was out on a hike and I stopped for lunch, and this couple sat down next to me and they said, well, what do you do for a living? And I was like, well, I collect poop. And I was kind of explaining the BioCollective, and they had their dog with them, and they said, oh, that makes perfect sense to us, because that's how we know if our dog is healthy. If our dog hasn't pooped today, if our dog has diarrhea, if it's having a hard time going, that's how we understand if our dog is healthy. And it just kind of, this light bulb went off for me, because I think a lot of people don't think about it. That they don't look at it, they don't think about it. And so then over the course of, 10 years, really started combing through the poop and becoming the poop queen to understand what are these different things that are impacting us, and what are the microbes in the gut that can be causing problems, and that not only the connection to Parkinson's, but many of these chronic diseases. And along the way, one of the things I learned is that there's so there's gram-positive bacteria and gram-negative bacteria. And a lot of the gram-negative bacteria produce something called endotoxin or lipopolysaccharide. And that's a little bit heavy on the science, but it's basically the cell wall of those bacteria. It's very hard and inflammatory. And they use it in scientific research models in diabetes, in Parkinson's, in depression. Like, you go look in the scientific literature, and there's probably 20 different models that are using endotoxin to drive inflammation in the body. And they also use it in cell models in science. It's the primary driver of inflammation. And so I was like, wow. I initially made our first product, the Sugar Shift product, for my husband, John. And that was actually designed from a meeting I went to, where they showed that this sugar alcohol could actually help stop the aggregation of the proteins and pull it out of the brain. And so I came back and said, could we make a system or a factory in the gut? And that's where this idea of making teams and using the information that we know about each of the bacteria through their genomes and putting together, kind of like you're putting together like the Lakers or, the Knicks or somebody like that. You want all the right team players together so that they are, working together to win the game, if you will. And so, I made that product, and John had such good results with it. We just started sharing it with people, and people, not just Parkinson's, but any. And we were getting all these positive results. And some people were like, this has actually helped my blood sugar. And so we wanted to do some kind of clinical work to understand the mechanisms, and also to look at this endotoxin. Are we able to change the gut and change the endotoxin? And so we chose to do a study in people with diabetes, because it's easier to look at. There are very specific markers for diabetes, where in something like Parkinson's, there's not specific agreed upon markers. And so we did a clinical trial of 60 people. So we had 30 in each group. And in the control group, they actually took a fiber. So they took the same fibers that are in the Sugar Shift formula, and we saw some positive results in some of the markers just with fiber, but we did not see the overall drop in this endotoxin marker, which turned out to be one of the key benefits of the formula. After 90 days, there was a significant drop in endotoxin, and after 180 days, we took a group and unblinded the study and took them on for another 90 days, and almost all of the endotoxin was gone at that point. So we started to look at what's going on in the gut and the metabolism, and what's happening is we're restoring the gut with this team of microbes to an anaerobic environment. So if you think about it, like, your gut's not supposed to be full of oxygen. And some of the really key important players in overall gut health are Akkermansia, bifidobacteria, and Fecaliprausnitzia, kind of a mouthful. But those are all very intolerant of oxygen. So if you have an aerobic gut environment, you're not going to have those three really important gut bacteria that are helping kind of shape your immunity and keep you healthy. And so what happened was we could see that the whole profile of the gut through the use of Sugar Shift was shifting back to an anaerobic environment and increasing things like bifidobacteria increased 3%, or, we got Fecaliprausnitzia and Roseburia and some of these really nice keystone species that either were there in very small amounts or not at all, and they came back. And so we got a much healthier overall microbiome. Plus, we got improvement in blood sugar, both fasting and postprandial. We got improvement in triglycerides. The fiber also helped with the triglycerides. So I always tell people, look at some of these fibers, because just taking fiber can help you with something like triglyceride. But the fiber did not help by itself with the blood sugar management or the endotoxin.
What kind of fiber did you put in Sugar Shift?
It has a chicory inulin.
Chicory and inulin. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, we put chicory in our coffee every morning.
Oh,
And
that's great.
yeah, it's delicious. Yeah, it's delicious. So you have an online group that really consistently measures a lot of this stuff. You're doing a Sugar Shift challenge. So for our listeners, if you had any interest in, having support, Martha has a great support group, for lack of a better term, but really a lot of friends, people that get to know each other, but you get to monitor, and you have speakers on there. You get to monitor what people are experiencing, and they see real results in terms of glucose management, in terms of weight loss, in terms of mental clarity. You're seeing improvements in sleep. I know.
But
It's just all along.
I had one person, I mean, I love this story. She did the Sugar Shift challenge with us, and she was somebody who was drinking, I think she said 7 lattes a day, sweetened lattes. And she was trying to kick sugar, because that's one of the other things it does, is it helps with those cravings as it's remodeling the gut. And she started taking it, and within a week she was down to 1 latte, which she said she didn't drink even all of that. And she lost like 15 pounds. Now, we don't talk about weight loss with it, because, people's experiences are very broad depending on what they eat, or if they're already off of sugars and things like that. But that was just a real mind-blowing kind of customer feedback for me, was that it could have that kind of a profound impact on somebody's life, but also on their budget. Because I was thinking, how much are you spending on those lattes? Like 7 lattes a day times 7 days a week. I mean, you could buy a retirement home for that.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Well, and I wonder what beneficial results there are in terms of yeast, or other things we can look at, say, on a GI map. Everything affects everything. We try to separate all these things out, and that's specifically why I like your consortiums, because they seem to move the needle in so many different ways, because our bodies are so interconnected. I'm sure that I don't know if you've been able to measure it, but I'm sure they're improving zonulin, wouldn't you say? Just
Well,
at least Mark.
I would think so, but I don't have anybody who has measured that other than John, and he did not have a zonulin issue, but which was kind of interesting, because I do think, like, sort of back to him, he was a marathon runner. This is something that people don't really understand when they're doing endurance exercise, particularly running, which is a pounding type of intense exercise, is that can damage all those membranes, just the vibration of the pounding over and over. And there's quite a bit of evidence that endurance athletes who are doing, running marathon type things, it opens up the gut and endotoxin leaks over into the bloodstream, and they have these sort of inflammatory episodes after a long run.
Mhm. Yes, Martha, I've in the patients I've seen, often I see that when they're really actively training, they have diarrhea, and then other times they have constipation. And in the world of functional medicine, we call that the J curve. So think of, where you want to be is kind of at that bottom of the J, just, dancing slow. But if you're doing nothing, if you're just, a couch potato, eating the standard American diet, you might be at the top of the J. But even these ultra fit people are at the other end of the J. They're not really where they need to be. They're not super healthy because of what you talk about. And then they just stress their bodies so incredibly. And it's hard to have enough nutrients when you're expending that kind of energy.
Well, so kind of back to the poop, because the poop is the real story. Is, you're talking about the J of diarrhea or constipation, or the most
Kind of the J of health, really.
a
Like
J of
people
health.
that
I would say that,
we have,
there's a J of the poop as well, or maybe
rules.
I'm more of a U, because there's something called the Bristol stool scale, and not everybody knows what that is. And I would tell you, after 10 years of being the poop queen, it only has 7 numbers, and that is nowhere near enough numbers to fully describe what's going on in our poop. But over here in the I hope I always flip them, but a 1 is a really hard, like rabbit pellets, very hard to pass the stool, and a 7 is like liquid. And you want to be right smack dab in the middle, smooth sailing like peanut butter, like no mess, just slips right out and away you go. And
Don't take a book in there. You don't need a bunch of cleanup. Yeah. I say not too hard, not too soft, Goldilocks, just right.
all right,
It's what you want.
you get that signal, and it's like, oh, I gotta go poop, and it takes you like 2 minutes. But that is not the case with the vast majority of people. And what we actually found in our lab was, as we were processing samples, so if a lot of people do a stool test and they're just taking a little scoop out of their poop and sending that off, we actually collected the whole thing, and we homogenized it and put it into little tubes and made it available for other scientists. And so in that process, our lab discovered that they could tell if somebody had Parkinson's just from their stool, and that it was like concrete, like like compacted soil is a very dense colloid. That's the same thing with a Parkinson's stool. It's incredibly dense. And if you think about that, how painful that can be to pass too, because it's very large, can have a large diameter. And, oftentimes people have to either go to the hospital and deal with a compaction, and doctors will often prescribe something like Miralax, which can help with the constipation, but is actually really bad for your microbiome. So those are, I understand the desperation, but so that's been an area of focus for us, is really trying to understand what's going on there and the battle in the gut between the good and bad bacteria that's producing this concrete. And then when it sits in your body, if it's, I went nuts the other day. I was watching this little short TED snippet from some GI doctor who said it was okay if it was normal if you only pooped 3 times a week. And that's just crazy. Let's go back to the dogs. We know our dog needs to poop every day. We're eating 2 or 3 meals a day. You should be removing that waste, because if you don't remove the waste, it sits in there, and the toxins in that waste are recycling in your system. And then your immune system and all of your metabolic processes are having to deal with those toxins over and over and over again. So, one of the things that Sugar Shift does also is helps people get going. get going regularly, like clockwork. So that's one of the things I hear a lot from people is it has really made my bowel movements like regular. There's no undigested food. It's, I'm the poop confessional.
No, it really matters, and I can't tell you how many times I hear the same thing, Martha, with, I go every 3 days and my doctor said that's my normal. And, then I, go into my diatribe about you don't want to be normal in our world. Normal's,
No,
dehydrated, irritated, frustrated, constipated, on and on and on. And I want to tell our listeners, when I first heard Martha speak and she talked about how they mix the whole bowel movement, which is so wise and so important. But I remember sitting there thinking, if I ever go to Martha's, I'm bringing my own blender. I don't want to use your blender at your house. I mean, all these experiments start in the kitchen. Everything starts at home, at least at our house. We just, figure it out as we go. So anyway, she has a big lab now, folks, so that's not a problem. So anyway, I want to also hear about antibiotic Antidote, because this is a really great place for people to start if they're on antibiotics, to go to the BiotiQuest website and order some antibiotic Antidote. Tell how you formulated that, Martha.
Well, that was actually pretty interesting because, it was on our radar of products we wanted to develop, but we hadn't worked on it with our computational modeling. And a good friend of mine who's been an advisor over the years, mother who was in her 80s, had to have her appendix removed and she got septic. And so then they put her on an IV antibiotic for about, I don't know, it was like 30 or 60 days. And it just totally messed up her what she used to have as regular bowel movements. And she was pretty upset about it. And, the doctor said, well, that's just how it is. And, maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't. And, she just was not feeling herself or feeling well. And Steve knew that we had been talking about this. And he said, are you going to make that antibiotic Antidote? And so I sat down with Raul and we went back and looked at it and put it back in our model. And the idea for it actually came, there was some research out of a university in Israel that had looked at this 11 strain formula and used it after antibiotics, and it actually made things worse. And so Raul and I were looking at that, and of course, he's got the greatest command of microbes of anyone I've ever met. And he looked at it and he said, well, I can tell you why they had a problem from the beginning is because this combination of microbes is going to make the whole environment too acidic, and it's not going to allow for the whole microbiome to rebound. And so we looked at it and put our team together to balance the pH so that you could restore a broader profile of gut bacteria. And so we said, okay, well, we'll make a tiny batch so your mom can have some. And we made just a small run of 200 bottles, and we sold out like bam. And so we're like, okay, there's something to this. And, people are exposed so often. So now I hear from lots of people who have either are about to take antibiotics or have taken antibiotics and have sort of a history of it disrupting their GI tract, who take that and say, it's made a huge difference. But along the way, my son, Charlie, who works for me, he wears one of those little Whoop, it's a tracker that has a stress management and a heart rate variability. And he had to take antibiotics for something. I can't remember what it was, but so he started taking the antibiotic Antidote, and he was looking at his Whoop data. And if he forgot to take it, he would have, it would mess up his heart rate variability. And when he took the antibiotic Antidote, he had a much better heart rate variability. So we just sent out a message to our loyal people to see if there's anybody interested who has an Oura Ring or a Whoop or some kind of Apple Watch that's measuring heart rate variability, to look at that and see if other people experience the same thing, because, then it has broader application than just restoring after the antibiotics. But, people don't realize that they're even exposed to antibiotic type ingredients in food. And I like to use the example of, the little tubs of either guacamole or hummus that you get at the store. That's like a petri dish for growing bacteria. And so they put these anti-enzymatic or antimicrobial type things on the top of that so that it won't grow bacteria and it has a longer shelf life. But of course, you think about that. If you're scooping, off the top of that, you're eating that. And that, if it's anti-enzymatic, it's also going to affect the enzymes in your gut and the ability to digest food.
Yes, and just the chlorine in the water, all of it. I mean, who in the heck knows what all new things our guts are dealing with in the last 100 years? It's really wild. Well, you've studied bifidobacterium a lot, and you found some pretty interesting things about bifido. Tell our listeners about that.
So bifidobacteria can fluoresce light. And this goes all the way back to the beginning of poop collecting, actually, and looking at the data of the genes in the microbiome of people and finding that there were genes involved in what would be sort of associated with photosynthesis. And, I called up one of my scientific friends and I'm like, there are genes involved with photosynthesis in the gut. And he said, that can't be true. There's no light in the gut. And I was like, well, the sunlight and different spectrum of light is absorbed into the skin and tissues. They use lasers, all these different things. And he said, well, okay, I guess you're right. And then bacteria actually emit light as a signal. I mean, we know that from, there's the one that's in the tides that can cause the problem with, it's like Vibrio with the oysters. You can get this fluorescent sheen in the ocean, and that's the Vibrio bacteria. And they, when they get to a certain level, they start emitting light. Well, bifidobacteria actually emits light, and they can distinguish different species by the different light that they're emitting. So what it does is it absorbs the very low frequency UV light and then sends it back out. And so, being in the sunlight and then absorbing that light and then having the bifido emit it. But bifidobacteria those are so important to our immune system and the training of our immune system. There's something called bifido infantis that babies are supposed to be populated with, and breast milk specifically feeds it. But in the Western world, we've actually a lot of our babies have lost it. We're formula fed, or just over time, these things have depleted the bifidobacteria that is so important for colonizing initially only bifidobacteria and training that immune system. And so the other thing during COVID, actually, Dr. Sabine Hazan, I never get it right, but she actually had the forethought to do some before and after testing, and she actually found that COVID and the vaccine, so either one of those, so it's probably the spike protein itself, because you get that either with having COVID or with the vaccine, but it specifically targets and kills bifidobacteria, and that's so important to our immune system. And I don't know, like I think about the light, and you can tell when people are kind of lit up. So, it makes me, there's no science behind that, but, I bet you have some bifidobacteria because you're always you're always glowing and full of light. So, it's really important that we start to restore the bifidobacteria. And so in our formulas, we do always have 1 or 2 strains with a specific function and behavior in mind, but the overall, like I said at the beginning, the restoring of the anaerobic state in the gut will also support those bifidobacteria. And then there are specific carbohydrates or fibers that feed different bacteria, and bifidobacteria particularly like something called xylo-oligosaccharides. And I think acacia fiber is also a good fiber um, I think recently I was looking at something like citrus pectin might also help. So, some of those different fibers you can help to feed those bacteria. And I was recently doing a blog write-up about carnivore diet, kind of before and after, or long-term keto. And because when you're in that really, really low carb state of a carnivore, you're not eating those fibers that feed the bifidobacteria. So I think even for people who are doing carnivore, like Paul Saladino now eats fruit and talks about fruit and that sort of thing. I think it's very important, if you're going to follow a carnivore or a very, very low carb ketogenic lifestyle, that you look at and find some specific carbohydrates to feed those bifidobacteria.
Interestingly, Martha, on the GI map, I often find Akkermansia too high in people who are carnivore or keto, not getting enough carbs to feed Akkermansia. So in what you've found over the years and what you've seen in all the people you've studied, how has that changed what you eat?
Well, it's, early in my busy career that I had, I was eating out at restaurants a lot, getting carry out, like I'm ashamed to say my kids' a box of macaroni was, sometime, I didn't know it,
On the case.
I didn't know any better. And so now, 'd say probably 95 to 97% of my meals are eaten at home. And if I am eating out, I'm making the wisest choice I can make off the menu. But it's really hard in restaurants. You don't know the food sourcing. You don't know. So, I mean, it's hardest probably when I travel, because I'll either try to fast more and eat fewer meals out, so that, if I'm gone for 5 or 6 days, I'm not eating, 15 meals out at a restaurant where I don't know where it's coming from. And so real food, I moved to a farm, so I have my own cows, my own chickens, and my own little garden. So I try to eat food where I know exactly where it came from, or I'm going to the farmer's market where I have a conversation with the farmer. I have this great little pork farmer who, is at my farmer's market, and I ask him all the questions about how he's growing them and what they're eating, and you can taste the difference. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's really not that hard to do these days, because there are local farmers markets all over the place. And we need to support those farmers too, because the diversity and what we get from having those local farming communities is so important, not just for our access to healthy food, but also just for the tightness of the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Joel Salatin was on the podcast a couple of months ago, and we had such a robust conversation. He was saying that so many of the farmers are retiring. They're in their 60s and 70s and older. So hopefully there'll be a whole bunch of young people who want to have these little homesteads and take their food to the farmer's market and, do the rotational grazing like Joel talks about. And then everything does taste better. I would challenge people listening, if you're buying regular beef, try some rotationally grazed grass-finished beef, grass-fed, grass-finished beef. You won't believe the difference. It's shocking, isn't it?
It is.
And even a cantaloupe. We stopped at a fruit stand and got a cantaloupe the other day, and it was like, wow, this is so good. This is full of life, probably. That's probably it.
Flavor.
Full of,
It has flavor. The cantaloupe you get at the grocery store and you get it home and it's got the color's a little pale and it just doesn't have that intense sweetness of like real food. Or
like real food.
really what they've done to the tomatoes just, slays me because I grew up in Kentucky. I'm back in Kentucky at the farm now, but tomatoes, all the years in Colorado, they're hard to grow out there, but they're all coming from whatever they do with these tomatoes and they don't have any flavor at all. And they have a really long shelf life, but I grew up on tomatoes. I walked outside, pulled it off the plant and just ate it like an apple.
Dirt and all. Yeah, dirt and
It's so fabulous. It's just got that indescribable flavor.
yeah, no, it's so good. It kind of once you retrain your taste buds, you don't want the other stuff. It's just
True.
it doesn't taste good at all. Now you have some other formulations that are consortiums of bacteria. I know you have a simple slumber, which helps people sleep. Just kind of touch on that. And I want to hear about the newest formulation you have.
Sure. So simple slumber we formulated. So people don't realize bacteria also make melatonin. And the bacteria, sort of back to that light, they're getting the signals of the light the same way we are, the morning light, the darkness at night. And they produce melatonin that can help us sleep. And they also produce tryptophan, which can help us sleep. So we made a formula that works together to help produce bacterial melatonin and tryptophan to help you just fall asleep gently, work for about 7 hours, and then kind of go on its way, and you wake up rested and feeling great and not groggy. And melatonin supplements. I just actually learned this because we had Lynn Peoples on our book club, who wrote the book The Inner Clock. Is that taking melatonin can actually disrupt your circadian clock depending on what time you take it. It can either push your clock forward or backward. So I'm much more mindful when talking to people about, maybe not a good idea to take melatonin as a supplement because of what it can do to your circadian clock.
Well, and when these bacteria are producing what our bodies naturally require, it's just so different than taking anything, any kind of sleep medicine, anything at all. So there's one I'm forgetting, Martha, another formulation you have.
Well, ideal immunity is one. Yeah, ideal immunity is one I like to talk.
Ideal immunity. That's what I was forgetting. Ideal immunity. Yeah.
It's very effective against a lot of the foodborne pathogens. And we see a lot of people who get food poisoning or something, and they never really fully recover. Well, we had a doctor in Hawaii who basically in the 1970s, he had a patient who returned from the Amazon jungle with some funky something, and he got whatever it was from his patient. And so from 1970 till, 4 years ago when he found our product, he had tried literally everything, Lamodal, like all the anti-diarrheals. He was taking them multiple times a day. He had tried all these different probiotics, and his daughter said, you need to try this new probiotic. And he's like, it's not going to work. And it worked for him. And he said it was like he got his life back. But can you imagine 40 years of severe chronic diarrhea? Just
when I got nutrient depletion, I'm surprised he didn't have Alzheimer's disease. Seriously.
Yeah.
With just nutrient depletion.
The other, it's 100 in our Petri dish lab test with one of the strains in there was 100% effective at killing all listeria. And listeria is kind of interesting. I didn't realize, but it can be associated with miscarriage and problems in pregnancy. And
Oh,
so
I didn't know that.
that was kind of an interesting aha for me, you know, seeing that connection. But so anyway, it's very effective against Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella, all of that. And some of those are the gram-negative bugs that are producing that endotoxin. So if you get food poisoning and you're struggling to get back, that's a great one. I always tell people, take it if you're going on foreign travel, or, if you eat out a lot in restaurants, because that's a place where you get exposed to these kind of bugs. So it's just a great kind of prophylactic thing to have in your cabinet. And then we have one called Heart Centered, and that is for cardiovascular support. And the bacteria work together to produce CoQ10, which supports heart health, nitrous oxide, and some of those B vitamins, and, just kind of that overall energy support that you need to support heart health.
Yeah, I wonder if some of those actually become oral microbes since they help produce nitric oxide. So many of the bacteria in the mouth that are the good guys support nitric oxide production. So then you, drum roll, have a new formulation, and I think it's going to be a super duper star, Martha.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Well, this one is near and dear to my heart. I've had it on the radar to bring out for a while, and I was like, this is definitely the year to do it. It's called Perfect Peace, because so many people are under incredible stress and anxiety. And the Perfect Peace is designed to support GABA, which is a calming, has a calming effect. It does have a little bit of tyrosine and tryptophan, which helps feed the microbes, but those are also important amino acids for kind of calming the nervous system. And that was one also I wanted to make for my daughter, who also suffers from anxiety and stress, and, kind of that whole generation that's her age in the, late 20s, early 30s, that have grown up with all this constant information and just constant stress. And so we just brought that out about a week and a half ago. So I've had it for about 3 weeks. And I was really surprised myself, because I don't think of myself as being stressed, although, I do probably have a stressful life. But I took one afternoon where I could sort of feel the stress building. And I took it, and probably 15, 20 minutes, I was like, wow, I'm feeling so much calmer. So Charlie, again, back to his Whoop, he has his, whatever the stress score, he doesn't know how they actually, what all factors go into it. But he has a, pretty stressful stress score. And even at night while he's sleeping, and he took it about 30 minutes before bedtime, and you could see the drop in the smoothing of his line, and this, nice, calm, no stress, peaceful sleep. And so I'm pretty excited about it. I usually take it about the middle of the day, where I sort of feel my intensity of work and everything kind of building up to a level of stress. But, you can take it in the morning or in the evening before you go to bed. And I think that's going to be one that really resonates with people, because there's so much stress in our world today.
There is. I didn't even have anxiety on my health history until about 6 years ago. And now brain fog and anxiety are both on there. And so many people are suffering. So I'm so glad that you have this formulation, because everything you do, Martha Carlin, is done to the bonus credit. You don't just try to make an A+, you always make bonus credit. And I so appreciate that about you. For our listeners, Martha and Gail and I have a group text, and a lot of times, my eyes just cross. Martha will start talking about something she just figured out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to go shoot some baskets. I need to go play ping pong. I need to, it's just amazing what you do. I admire you so greatly. And I love, I love your story, because, you lost John, you gave him so many more years of good life because of your tenacity. And I know that you said that your misery, God sort of turned it into your mission. So thank you for that, Martha.
Well, I appreciate that, and I thank John for the hardest part of the journey that he had to teach me everything, and without his journey, I wouldn't be here. So I am very grateful for that. And I was talking to a young woman who's lost her mother from Parkinson's earlier today, and it makes me sad that all this work that that there are people I haven't been able to make enough progress to turn it around for these people. But I do think we're so close to really being able to understand these underlying factors, the total toxic burden, the microbiome factors, and all of that, so that people won't get Parkinson's, because we can tell them how to prevent it, and people won't get all of these chronic diseases because we'll understand how important the gut is, and we'll be taking care of that and pulling all those. And we haven't even talked about the oral microbiome, and you and Gail have taught me so much about that, and it's all connected and how important it is. And you brought up nitric oxide, and like I make my little beet kvass and swish it around in my mouth every morning when I get up and at night before I go to bed, so that I know I have my nitric oxide bacteria in there.
Yeah, we're all learning from each other. Dr. Nathan Bryan was on the podcast, and I met him at A4M probably 10 years ago. And I was utterly, even just 10 years ago, shocked that the oral microbiome was important for producing such an essential chemical for full body health. So we're all learning from each other. We all have lots to learn. The more I learn, the more I know I don't know. So it's a super fun journey.
It is, and it's a super fun journey to be on with people like you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time today. Tell our listeners exactly how to find you.
You can find us, you can find our probiotics on BiotiQuest. So that's BiotiQuest, which is like Life Quest. And we also have a YouTube channel where we have lots of educational material, and that's also under YouTube BiotiQuest. And I have if you're interested in Parkinson's, I have a Parkinson's blog, Martha's Quest. And I also have a Substack where I write about the microbiome generally and also specific to Parkinson's. And that's also called Martha's Quest.
Yeah, you hear the love in that, Martha's Quest. That's so wonderful. Are you on Instagram?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, are you?
Yeah, we're on Instagram. Yeah. So at BiotiQuest on Instagram. And we we post shorts and educational things on there and try to be fun, but we're nowhere near as fun as you are on Instagram, Debbie. I love your videos.
Oh, thank you. I've got a funny one planned for today. So thank you. I appreciate the support. I'm not sure I need the encouragement, but thank you anyway. But thank you, and thank you, listeners. I think humor is like one of the main things for health span and vitality. So Martha and I just have had so much fun together. We're going to have a lot more fun together through the years. And to all our listeners, go out and have some fun. I'm going to go freak the neighbor kids out and shoot some baskets. I see this old lady out there, and they're just like, ah. I say, come on over. I'll play a game of horse. And, I always win. So anyway, So thank you all for listening. Join me on Instagram. Join Martha on Instagram, and go get you some probiotics. We have them in our cabinet. We take Sugar Shift every night, and these others kind of based on how we need them. And we eat well, but I think in our world, it's just imperative to make sure that you are nourishing your microbiome. There's a lot of trashy pills out there. I don't believe very much that comes along, but I believe Martha Carlin. So thank you, Martha, for your time, and thank you, listeners. We're now in 145 countries, and I think about 6,500 cities, and that's thanks to you. Please subscribe. Oh, please share. I'm supposed to say all this stuff that I forget to say. And please give me a comment, a good one if you have one. Blessings until next time.
Thanks for joining us on Vitality Made Simple podcast. Be sure to visit drdebbieosment.com for our courses and resources designed to help you feel better, look better, and enjoy better relationships. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for joining us.